More phenomenal and interesting guests today. We have RFK the Third. Did you know there's a grandson? You can follow him on X at Bobby Kennedy X. The book he has written is called, here it is. I'm sorry, but I'll tell you it's about Dr. Fauci. And what got my attention was, there it is, The Confessions of Anthony Fauci, was this tagline. It's follow the science became don't you follow the money. Really an interesting way of looking at this. He uncovered all kinds of interesting things, including USAID and use of trafficking bats. We'll get into all that, and then we'll be getting a call from Brazil. Marc Morano, he is at the UN's conference for climate change. They've cleared out a ton of the Amazon to accommodate these guys, their gas-guzzling vehicles and jets. The idea is net zero for a population that does not have sewage. Fantastic. We'll talk to Mark, and we'll talk to Bobby Kennedy the Third after this.
Our laws as it pertains to substances are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
Next year, the national debt is going to hit $40 trillion. As insane as that sounds, it's even worse when you consider unfunded liabilities for Social Security and Medicare. If our status as the world's reserve currency suddenly changes, our nation could collapse under the weight of its debt. And as we all know, there are many forces trying hard to take down that U.S. dollar. This is why thousands of Americans are moving portions of their retirement into physical gold and silver. Our friends at Augusta Precious Metals have put together a 3-minute report entitled Debt Will Hit $40 Trillion in 2026. Prepare your retirement now. It details how a self-directed IRA with real physical assets may be the best option in 2025. Go to drdrew.com/gold. That is DRDREW.com/GOLD, or text Drew, DREW, to 35052. That's 35052. And you'll get instant access to this crucial report. If you have $50,000 or more in your IRA, 401k, TSP, or other retirement accounts, consider our friends at Augusta Precious Metals to give you the information you need to make an informed decision about your retirement. It's fine to fight for our nation's future, but we all need to protect our own futures first. Read this important 3-minute report by visiting drdrew.com/gold. That is drdrew.com/GOLD. Or text Drew to 35052 and see what Augusta can do for you.
The book is Confessions of Anthony Fauci. My apologies if I seem a little bit addled today. I'm in an undisclosed location with our friends from the Wellness Company, and we had to get this. We've got a pretty good setup here going, but it's unfamiliar to me. So it's, I'm like an old dog that if you screw with the environment, suddenly it messes everything up. But I am very excited to talk to our guest today. It is Robert F. Kennedy III. The book is The Confessions of Anthony Fauci. He has uncovered a ton, and he's here to share it with us. He, let's see what else I can tell you. But he's directed Fear and Loathing in Aspen, about Hunter S. Thompson's 1970 run for sheriff. And he is married to a former CIA officer who is currently Deputy Director of National Intelligence. Robert, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Drew. I have to say,
so first,
I have fond memories. I have fond memories of my friends gathering together to listen to Loveline on the radio as a kid. And
where were you? What part of the country at that point?
I was in DC, and I kind of was thinking about how people used to get together and listen to something, kind of have that communal experience.
No, that's right. No, that you're just right at you're the last, the Mohican, so to speak. You're the last remnant of a generation that remembers the importance of radio and how it was a collective listening experience. There was, you defined yourself by the culture of that radio station and the music that was on that station. And in those days in DC, that was, they would have that big concert at RFK Stadium, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it JFK Stadium?
Yeah.
What they called it.
And then there was the DC chili cook-off. I remember that getting crazy. But, I would say, do you think that was kind of the lockdowns that completely did in the communal culture? Or do you think it was, the switch from radio to podcasting or something like that?
It was, yeah. It was the distribution of media, yeah, where it all became all of a sudden so democratized and so fragmented that there's no longer any unifying. I mean, certainly there's a sort of Joe Rogan, there's a place that people go, or Jordan Peterson is a place that people go. But back in the day, you would go to events and things that were held by your local radio station. Was it called the HF Festival? WHFS?
Oh, the HF Festival.
Yeah.
That's right.
That was the thing.
Yeah, and people used to gather around the radio. It seems funny because people say that and you'd think like, 1940s, but really in the 90s, we were still doing it.
Loveline was one of those things where people would do that, and then you'd talk about it the next day in school and stuff. But let's talk about you. So you're married to a national security or national intelligence expert, a CIA agent. How has that shifted your understanding of the world?
Well, when we got married, she had done basically 10 years undercover, China, Iraq, Afghanistan. She wrote a best-selling book, and the agency actually tried to stop us from publishing it at the last minute. She went ahead anyway, and now she's in charge of their entire budget. So, So, certainly, I'd say her role, not just as Tulsi's deputy, but at the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, allowed her to kind of really look into this weird NGO to, private company / foundation, weird circle of cash moving around, and just see how much gets siphoned off. And it's a horrifying amount, much more than people think.
When you say siphoned off into dark, spurious projects, or just unpredictable sort of,
I think it's more like they just take a lot of the money, through every single subcontractor. Somebody takes a bite of it, and probably 95% of the money is ending up in somebody's pocket. Some would argue that gets washed back into our politics, but
how is it? One of the things I shake my head about these days is people that seem fearful of competition, who disdain people who succeed at competition, somehow trust centralized authority of government to spend money in some way that's exclusively good, in spite of there being no checks and balances and no accounting and just unlimited evidence of grift. I don't understand how people can still have that opinion.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, you could ask those people about, the classic examples of the toilet seat costing $60,000, and they'll have heard that. But for some reason, they won't make the leap to, no, that's not just the Pentagon. That's like the entire U.S. government.
Right.
Federal government, anyway. And
by the way,
it's the same people that would say like, well, the CIA was dirty in the 1960s and the 1970s and the 1980s, but it's not dirty anymore.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. So you go on this journey into the Fauci story. What motivated you to look into this, and what sort of surprised you as you looked under the hood?
I would say, kind of the concept of the book is everybody would love it if Fauci came out and just made a full confession, told the truth, no hesitations, it'll never happen. So I figured that'd be a funny book to write. And kind of, whereas many people have to be very careful about what they say. You read my dad's book, The Real Anthony Fauci. It's it's the citations are everywhere. Because he has to think like a lawyer, and he has to prove exactly what happened. And unfortunately, because the U.S. government is really good at not leaving a trail of crumbs. I mean, the crumbs are there, but there's not a directly provable in-court chain of command. It's distributed. So my dad and many other people in this Fauci space are hesitant to make jumps to conclusions or about exactly what they were doing. But I figured under the lens of a satire book, you're kind of free to do that. So I think this is probably close to the truth of what happened, although I probably have to say allegedly a lot during this interview.
Well, explain to me, you sort of couch it in satire, yet at the same time you're saying, well, but the reality is there's some truth here. How is it? Are there some places where you just go off the plantation and make jokes, or is it speculative and then you pull back and go, but in fact, here's what happened?
I would say the satire is more in the voice because it's written in Fauci's voice as though he's telling it to you. And I kind of made it as though it was like Fat Tony from The Simpsons giving you the rundown, So the jokes are in there. It's just more in how he talks. The facts are the facts.
But let's talk about, how we can learn from your book. In other words, sometimes jokes are a great way to teach, right? And get people to consume information. What did you do to anchor your information? Did you do anything, or was it just all off hearsay? Or did you use your dad's book, or where's the anchor so we don't go too far away from reality?
I used a combination of my dad's book, Real Anthony Fauci, his second book about it, the Wuhan lab book. And I would say 90% of the book is based on those facts, and 10% is based on just things that have happened since then. So it's entirely factually based. It's
give
more
an example of what that thing that happened might be since those two books.
Well, I would say, we had earlier on the show, we were talking about the WHO pandemic agreement. Michelle Bachmann was there talking about it, right?
Yeah.
So that basically happened, in May. And when the U.S. withdrew from that, I would say massive win on the Trump's part, get us out of that. You look at the other countries that just kind of wouldn't go along with that vote. You've got, Italy, Israel, Russia, Slovakia. There's some holdouts, Iran too in there. But, all in all, I don't think I make any crazy jumps. I do toward the end, kind of spin it into this why they do it. And it's kind of like a little esoteric poetry, I'd say. But I think people can read it and they'll learn and they'll have a laugh. And maybe that'll help them remember better.
Yeah, I mean, it does, as long as they can kind of discern what is satire and what is sort of has at least some foundation in cited facts. I'm going to go back to your wife and your relationship with the intelligence community again. And let me maybe I should ask you this way: you uncovered some data about NGOs and coronavirus and bats, right? Bat transports.
Yes.
And was that for this book, or was that something else you had done?
No, I mean, I would say like the general story here is the classic Washington loop where you have, USAID giving money on this program called Predict that was meant to go around and, just take massive samples of animal zoonotic viruses, bats, rats, and et cetera, and catalog them into a database and basically share that database with countries around the world in a way that, on the face of it, at least in, say, China's case, doesn't really make much sense. So I was attempting to...
Hang on a second. Why doesn't it make much sense? I mean, so far to me, that sounded like maybe not a great use of money, but a reasonable thing to do to catalog zoonotic viruses. So if things you can sort of compare things that flip over to humanity and whatnot. But where does it not make sense with China?
Well, essentially, we paid to give a 20,000 viruses to the Wuhan lab, but we didn't get a copy of them ourselves, which kind of seems like a strange thing.
That does seem strange.
The U.S. to do. We also taught the same lab the Ralph Barrick's no-seum technique, which isn't useful at all unless you're trying to hide essentially a bioweapon.
Right.
So that's kind of the questions I'm trying to raise is if you get 2 steps deep in this story, none of what they're saying makes any sense. I don't think there's really any argument for gain of function research. It seems to me to, it's a bioweapon factory. I think that's kind of been proven. There really isn't any useful purpose to that research. I'd love to debate anybody on that because it doesn't pass muster.
So what do you imagine, or do you have a theory on what our relationship was with that lab? What was the U.S. relationship? Were we laundering research through them? What did we think we were doing with that lab? And reminding ourselves, there was a time when the communities between China and U.S., not that long ago, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, were very close. And so the sense of collaboration, even though, let's be fair, the U.S. scientists were obviously and completely hoodwinked, but the sense of collaboration was in the air. Is this a remnant of that?
Well, I think that's quite possibly what they would like you to believe. Not sure that it's true, unfortunately.
Who's they?
The people that, let's say, essentially the infrastructure, the virus infrastructure, you got all, massive elements of the U.S. military, but USAID, and Fauci's department, the NIAID, NIH. But basically what happened was, we outlawed biological weapons research. It immediately got spun into, sort of this predictive modeling thing where they attempt to predict what viruses will come out by going and gathering them all, which, maybe it makes sense to have a bunch of these viruses, but are the chances of something happening, does that outweigh the risk there? And I'd say, then you have something like the diffuse proposal, which very closely mimics what was happening in the Wuhan lab leak. And, right there you have them experimenting with bat-borne coronaviruses and attaching, spike proteins there in humanized mice.
Yeah.
That's a chimeric virus. There's absolutely no reason that to build that unless you are trying to create a bioweapon. I think, so that begs the question, is this research legitimate? Or are they just making bioweapons? And I would firmly say, and I say so in the first 3 paragraphs in the book, that you're kind of an idiot if you believe this wasn't a bioweapon program.
Yeah, I've spoken to scientists who have had to flee China because they were doing coronavirus research on this backbone for the People's Liberation Army on their secret bioweapon program. I mean, there's people that will report, eyewitnesses will report what they've done, legitimate sources. But let me switch gears a little bit to a couple other topics I'm interested in probing with you. One is the USAID generally. I mean, the amount of, I don't know what to call it, waste, I guess I would just call it, and the amount of sort of money that went to NGOs that were working against the interests of this country, it seems at least. How do we explain that? How do we understand that? Is it, again, just what you were describing at the beginning, or just people get their hands on money and they just launder it out places of their particular interest?
That, at the minimum, that's what's happening. My wife was in charge of sort of dismantling USAID. And basically, I don't know if you saw that James O'Keefe interview. So a lot of it was, as that guy said, they're throwing gold bars off the deck of the Titanic. A lot of spending just basically goes into payola, helps whoever the Democrat charge was, big funds. But a lot of it seems to get siphoned off in weird ways to overseas that seem essentially similar to what organized crime would do. I think it's a political organized crime family in this case, but
and was that the Biden family, the Clinton family, the Democratic committee? Who was the crime family?
Well, I would say the Clinton Global Initiative has some dirty hands on this one, and I would say, if you look at USAID and the program, the Predict, which essentially shipped all these viruses to Wuhan. The bagman of those viruses was a company called Metabiota. And, Hunter Biden's Rosemont Seneca owned a 25% stake in that. So I think you can kind of create a vision of what happened here. And I think it all circles back into we're a country that, basically DC is a big sucking squid that is here to take your money and use it for nothing good.
And again, back to people that see the government as wholly good, the only source to solve all problems. Is there a learning curve here? Are people understanding that? I'm only recently I've heard people in the federal government talk about taxpayers' dollars, your money being used in certain ways. That is new language that I haven't heard for 30 years. Is anybody learning anything? Are things going to be different there? Or does the public, are they waking up to what's been happening?
I think a lot of it is the media, right? If there was an actual news network that just covered every crazy thing that happens in DC and focused on every crazy ripoff program they have and did deep dives, I wish CNN would do something like that. Maybe somebody will buy it and they will. But,
or maybe
that's one of the crazy things
You should do a podcast. You should do a series of podcasts on the top 10 craziest squid sucking programs in DC. I'll play them. I'll air them on my
stealing your idea. I'm going to do that. And
I hope you do.
And you should take my wife on here and interview.
The irony would just be tremendous. And your wife can be an advisor. It's all, you're ready to go.
Yeah, we keep a list of all these crazy stories, and they're astounding. I think.
Can you share one?
Well, unfortunately, they're boring, and that's how they like to keep it. And oftentimes, the funny thing is that you can, if you just start and go from A to Z on everything USAID was giving out, you'll find company after company that doesn't even have a website. They got $250 million, and they, were created less than 2 months before. There's no field in there that says what they do. That's part of their initiative. And so you just can kind of it's a way to move money in ways that the taxpayer would scream at you if they knew that you were picking their pocket to do this stuff with. So
it just seems to me like there should be a lot of millionaires propping up all over the place that I suppose they could always just say, I won the lottery or something, and people wouldn't ask that many questions. But where are they?
Well, so probably back when I was listening to Loveline, all of the top most expensive cities in America were, on the coast. And now the 4 richest cities in America surround DC. So I think a lot of the money is just going into people's pockets. Unless Catherine Austin Fitz is right and they're building underground military bases. But I don't want to think about that.
Yeah. So and the other part, is your last name, which do you see the legacy of the Kennedys in government differently, A, and B, you're a Kennedy and your wife's in the intelligence operation. Can't you get the questions answered about what happened to your grandfather and your granduncle?
Well, I figured out how this stuff works the second I heard that there were 7 shots fired and Sirhan only had 5 chambers in his gun. The problem is, reconstructing who exactly was in charge of these things is tough. I think to some extent, when the CIA was operating in its most dirty period, they moved a lot of their programs to private companies so that people wouldn't have the ability to look into them. And so I think there's never going to be a real paper trail that says, this is Alan Dulles, I ordered the Kennedy hit. But I think, once again, if you are willing to do something kind of like what I did with this Fauci book, which is what's the most likely thing that happened here, you can see it for what it is, which is, essentially possibly a cult of madmen running this country. And I wouldn't be surprised if they wear robes and light candles.
How about the first part of my question? How do you see your family's legacy within this infrastructure?
I think it's a continuation of what JFK and RFK were trying to do, what my dad is doing. I can't speak for the rest of my family. I think they've all gone nuts. But my wife is a warrior for truth. She's in there trying to reform the intelligence agencies. It's a miracle that there's a moral person in there these days. Yeah. And, she can't even tell me what she's working on half the time. She has a Q clearance. But
explain to people what that means. It's above the president, isn't it?
Above top secret, or
Yeah.
But, it's like why QAnon was called QAnon.
Interesting.
I would say, though, that it's Washington is turning. What do they say about turning a battleship? Right? It's a hard thing to do, I think. But we're now in an era where we've got AI that can potentially make connections that would take a human a lifetime in seconds. So I think it's making it a lot easier to kind of see where the money's moving and follow it. And, if we could have a nice, responsible press, my upcoming show, but if only they would report on this stuff. I feel like...
I think the time has come. Robert, we have to take these things into our own hands. The wishing for a responsible press seems to be a fool's errand these days, but you can find traction with interesting material. People will find you. So let's go forth and uncover the craziest stories from a historical standpoint or from an academic standpoint, if no other reason, to get some of those idiots turned on their heels a little bit to start to teach the truth rather than the fantasies about how things ought to be.
I think what you were going with at the beginning is so important. Like, where does this groupthink come from? And, how does it emerge? And I feel like you kind of wrote that great book about contagious narcissism and celebrity.
Yeah.
But why normal people are able to be hoodwinked so easily? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, it's, the hypnotists tell us that people are really easily persuaded, hypnotized, more so than we like to admit. And what's that guy's name? Not Dan Brown. His name is
Darren
Brown. I think he does. What is it?
Darren Brown.
He does all these experiments where he shows you how easy it is and how susceptible some people are. Not everybody. And when you look on the scale of mass psychosis, where people get hysterical, 20-30% of the people go all the way. They are the true believers. They are the evangelists. And 10%, maybe even as much as 20% sometimes, is the group that goes, excuse me, something's wrong. This doesn't feel, no. I'm not so sure of these things. And then there's 70% in the middle that just want to be left alone. And some of those are persuaded, and some of those will kind of go along one way or the other. That's the group we got to contend ourselves with, the kind of normies who just want to live their lives, take care of their family, and make a difference in their own small way, not save the world, which is an insane idea. That's narcissism writ large.
On a weird side note, and that Darren Brown in that show did an episode where he recreated the RFK assassination, and it's crazy.
Weird.
Yeah, he got a guy to stand up, shoot a blank gun at Stephen Fry in the middle of an auditorium of people, and then sit right back down and not remember he had done it. Pretty crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, this is the thing. This is what even these aspects of the human brain are ineffable, and they're not technically in psychology, because psychology is a clinical science, really. People get problems and conflicts and traumas, and how do we heal that? Definitely not on the sort of cognitive dissonance side, because they're actually in an altered state when they're doing these things. It's not, the cognitive systems aren't even operating. So there's this sort of middle zone. Go ahead.
I have a theory that a lot of DC actually runs on the kind of hypnosis that Darren Brown does. I think occasionally
100%.
Politicians, somebody will walk in that room and do the weird handshake, put them down for 20 seconds and tell them, you're going to do this. Or maybe get them in a situation where they do something really bad on videotape. Either way. But, if people can do that on stage in 10 seconds, imagine what's happening in this town.
Well, not only that, at very minimum, they are hiring people that are experts in this kind of, I'm using the word persuasion, that's Scott Adams' word, that are experts in that kind of persuasion and getting people to do things on a mass scale. They're using these techniques, and these techniques are very powerful in their work, and in the wrong hands. We need to stop. You got to get your wife on this. We need to stop using propaganda techniques against the American people. This is not just immoral. It's an emergency, and it's disgusting. I mean, this can only go bad. Or we have to.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that they launder it in the same way that they laundered this virus, which is, since they can't propagandize the American people, they, basically threaten Facebook or Instagram or under the table in a way that, this is a nice house, it would be bad if you lost it, kind of mafia-esque threat. Yes. And then they do what they know they're supposed to. It's everything kind of works like that at this point. You have 3 levels.
You have a really interesting perspective on these things. Don't keep push this. Do more documentaries. Push this stuff out, because I think you have certainly you have a special opportunity from the perspective that you have, and you have some really interesting insights and interesting ways of describing them that people will be at least listening. They may not all grab them with both hands and go, "Oh, this guy's speaking the truth." It makes you think, at least, like, yeah, this is some of what's going on here. My producer keeps sending me information about pharma ads on television. Is that something you're fighting against? I know your dad obviously is.
I think that would be a big step toward curing our media environment with 75% of the news networks.
I don't think so. I don't think so, Robert. I think it's certainly back to your mafia models. There's that kind of control elements, but these are that 20% of true believers. I'm more interested. I'll tell you what a great documentary would be. What's going on inside CBS when Barry Weiss gets in there? Are these people waking up? Are they seeing their bias? Are they fighting her? We have the BBC just admitting that they put together a false video and script of what Donald Trump had said was the fine people known as the January 6th hoax. That they put that together. It was a complete hoax. They're admitting it now. And then their next word is, "But we're not biased at the BBC. We give the truth, and our news is never biased." Really? It would be. So how did you manage to do this?
Yeah, I just wish people like you could wave a magic truth wand on some of these people and get them to say why they actually did certain things, because they're professional liars, but they're not even very good ones. And I think
they're kind of true believers, though. I think they're true believers, and they're hoodwinked, they're brainwashed. They're in a community that believes itself, and that's why I'm interested in Barry Weiss. Whether there's any sort of aha, to not from the standpoint of getting them, but the standpoint of do they wake up in some way. But in any event, get Confessions of Anthony Fauci, R.F. Kennedy the third. Keep an eye on him. He's got some interesting insights, and he's been around the swamp. So he's been swimming in the swamp. Multiple generations of swimming in that swamp.
Thank you, Drew. Have a great one.
All right, my friend. Good to talk to you. Good luck with the book. Next up, we are switching gears, and we're going to hear from Brazil. It is the climate. He's Marc Morano. He's got climatedepot.com. He's the author of The Great Reset, Global Elites and the Permanent Lockdown. I'm trying to remember the name of the thing that he's at right now. Okay, it's the UN's COP30, also known as the Clear-Cut 30, because they clear-cut, there's the Great Reset, they clear-cut a bunch of Amazon forests to let these idiots meet. They brought their jets in to tell people, a population, 80% of which does not have sewage, that they should be net zero in the next 100 years or something to prevent a 0.5 degree change in the global climate, which not even clear that we can change that with that net zero. Not that net zero is not a great idea. It's just at what cost. All right, Marc Morano, when we get back.
I've spent most of my career dealing with illnesses that shorten life, and now we have ways to extend it and extend wellness. I've been working with the team over at V-Shred to develop a product that has everything I want in a longevity supplement. NR Boost has nicotinamide riboside. You know how metal can rust? Well, your body behaves in a similar way. It's mediated through something called NAD. NAD falls as we age, so we're less able to fight off that oxidative process. We oxidize much like that metal. And NAD fights it, but nicotinamide riboside elevates NAD so we can push back on those oxidative stressors, improving health, improving longevity. The other product is Senosync, has fisetin, one of the key molecules to fight off zombie cells, and we've added resveratrol to that, which is a well-known anti-aging antioxidant again. I don't like supplements that have a ton of ingredients. To me, it suggests that none of it's working. When I prescribe a medication, I prescribe that medicine because I expect that to work. That is exactly what I've done with these products. And I want you to go to drdrew.com/vshredmd for 10% off. Again, that is drdrew.com/vshredmd. I'm excited to bring you a new product, a new supplement, Fatty. I take it. I make Susan take it. My whole family takes it. This comes out of, believe it or not, dolphin research. The Navy maintains a fleet of dolphins. And a brilliant veterinarian recognized that these dolphins sometimes developed a syndrome identical to our Alzheimer's disease. Those dolphins were deficient in a particular fatty acid. She replaced the fatty acid, and they didn't get the Alzheimer's. Humans have the same issue, and we are more deficient in this particular fatty acid than ever before. And a simple replacement of this fatty acid called C15 will help us prevent these syndromes. It's published in a recent journal called Metabolites. It's a new nutritional C15, pentadecanoic acid, it's called. The deficiency that we are developing for C15 creates something called the cellular fragility syndrome. This is the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years and may be affecting us in many ways, and as many as 1 in 3 of us. This is an important breakthrough. Take advantage of it. Go to fatty15.com/Dr. Drew to receive 15% off a 90-day starter kit subscription, or use code Dr. Drew at checkout for that 15% off, or just go to our website, drdrew.com/fatty15. The wellness company knows that taking charge of your family's healthcare is a top priority, and being rationally ready, and who knows what the future will hold for us. Now, TWC has a service to cover your family's medical needs, including and especially prevention. For just $100 a month, the One Wellness Elite membership includes 2 free medical-grade nutraceuticals per month, free prescriptions for over 800 of the most common medications, access to concierge telemedicine, available at a moment's notice, and a 15% discount on all supplements and the emergency kits. 15% off the emergency kits. That's quite a saving. So if you're spending $100 or more on supplements and meds every month, this plan will already save you money. If you sign up for a year, you'll save $200. And when you use the link, drdrew.com/CWC, you'll get 10% off the first payment to the One Wellness Elite membership. Check out One Wellness at drdrew.com/TWC and get 10% off your first payment. drdrew.com/TWC. It's all there.
And that suggests trouble in a relationship.
Sean, who are you? Like Dr. Drew all of a sudden?
The book is The Great Reset. He is in Brazil at this moment. There's a lot to get into here. Mark, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Drew. Happy to be here. I'm in Belém, Brazil.
Phenomenal. Set the stage again. They cleared the Amazon so these guys could land their jets and bring their Lamborghinis in?
It's exactly what they did. And this information was an exclusive brought to us by the BBC just a few months ago. And I give the BBC full credit. They reported that Brazil clear-cut tens of thousands of acres, hundreds of thousands of tropical Amazon rainforest for a new 4-lane highway in the city explicitly for this UN climate summit, which, by the way, is the 30th consecutive UN climate summit. Although actually, I had to think back. I don't know if they had one in 2020. They may not have because of COVID, but they had one the year later with, of course, fully masked and all the vaccines and everything. I actually attended the COP in Scotland, and I got an exemption because I refused to get the Fauci shot. And I was able to get in because they had an equity clause because the developing world didn't have full access. So I was able to travel to Europe and bypass their vaccine mandate. At any rate,
wow.
This conference was in such a small city that Brazil decided they needed a clear cut for this stretch of highway, all this rainforest, and they've been very secretive about it. The BBC used drone footage, and we tried. I have a video if you go to my X account at Climate Depot of me at where some of the construction is still going on, but it's hard to actually get to where they're still clear cutting because it's all seemed to be closed off. None of the locals know anything about it. Brazil now, I'm calling it guilt trip 30. Well, we're calling it clear cut 30 because they clear cut this. But now Brazil is calling for billions of dollars to be paid to developing world countries not to clear cut their rainforest. And my solution is a lot less expensive. How about not clear cutting it for a UN climate summit? Let's start with that.
Exactly.
But the Brazilian environmental minister actually went on record with the BBC as saying, we had to clear cut the forest. Well, first of all, they need the space. They need to have the traffic flowing for the limousines and the SUVs. They need for all the private jets and all the world leaders. They needed to be able to move. But secondly, he wants as many people as possible crammed into the city of Belém so they can showcase to the world how they've been saving the rainforest. And now, of course, they want to be paid billions of dollars not to chop down the rainforest. So the whole thing is just it's sort of the UN climate circus in a nutshell.
And you've been going to these things for a while. How have they changed?
Well, great question. I've been going to 22 of the last 24. My first one was the UN Earth Summit in 2002 in Johannesburg, South Africa. The biggest change I've witnessed is the corporatization of the UN Climate Summit. In other words, if you went back in 2002, 2005, 2008, I've been to Kenya, into Bali, into South America, Buenos Aires, Lima, Peru, all over the world. I've been to Cairo. I've been actually Sharm el Sheikh, Egypt. We've been to Dubai. We've been to Marrakesh, Morocco. The old UN summits would have a lot of the sort of left-wing, old-school environmentalists lamenting about capitalism, pro-socialist. It was just what you would expect, a lot of aging hippies. In about late 2000s, certainly anything post-COVID, it's all been co-opted. And what's happened is it's called the financialization of nature. You now have, courtesy of the World Economic Forum and everyone else, all these big corporations in collusion with government who basically want to own all the land rights, water rights, private property. You have the gobbling up. Some African nations, a fifth of all their land are now owned by these carbon offset companies, many of them headquartered in Europe through corporations. So white, wealthy Westerners are being able to fly private jets, high carbon carbon lifestyles, and they buy these carbon offsets, which then buy land in Africa at below market rates and basically tell the local population, you can't develop this land. And so what's happened is they're talking about, they're basically going to be buying up water rights, river, land, agriculture. This is why Bill Gates is number one farmland owner in the US. This is why the Netherlands was trying to crush under net zero climate policies of the UN. All the small independent farmers in Europe, about 10 to 12,000 Netherlands farmers were facing oblivion if the methane rules and all the net zero climate rules went in because, for some reason, agriculture was declared a threat to climate and cow emissions. Bill Gates was funding that. So that's the biggest change. And so with that corporate shift and that corporate interest and the corporate subsidies, everything's been sanitized. Now you go into a UN summit, instead of, even you'll still see stuff like climate justice and the stupid buzzwords, but it's all like crafted, careful language, corporate slick advertising, all the places you walk around. That's the biggest change. It's the corporate takeover of the environmental left and the climate movement.
Well, there's tons of money there, right? And so they're just taking their cut. This is like what Robert was just talking about with the USAID. So
yes.
How do people reconcile the predictions that were so dire that have not come true? The fact that Bill Gates just took the position that, well, really, we got to worry about things like, the people that are surrounding this event in Brazil don't have sanitation. Yet we're going to ask them to be net zero. Give me a effing break. And then by the same token, I just heard, oh my God, there's a crack in the ice. It's actually going to happen. It's going to raise the water levels 10 feet.
Yes.
Where is the truth? And what are they saying about that? How has it changed things?
Well, oddly enough, the truth now is being spoken by none other than Bill Gates. And Bill Gates isn't just a billionaire. I mean, he is the godfather of the climate movement. He is the number one funder. He got his hand in everything. He's got his hand in obviously public health, Gavi, and number one funder to the World Health Organization. When you combine the Bill and Melinda Gates with his Gavi organization, he's involved heavily with the merging, if you will, of COVID and climate. Public health and climate. World Health Organization has declared sort of a climate emergency. Climate is an existential threat. You have hospitals now following net zero rules, restrictions on surgeons washing up. You have American Cancer Society fretting over the carbon footprint of cancer treatment. Yeah. Just last month, you had asthma, the carbon footprint of asthma treatment. You have people going after anesthesia. I mean, this is just nuts. So you have Bill Gates funding all that. Bill Gates is also funding the research into Harvard University to block out the sun, injecting chemicals in the sky to essentially stop the sun from heating up the earth, to geoengineer our climate. Bill Gates is also heavily invested in the lab-grown meat and the fake meat, vegetable oil processed. The lab-grown being different to make that distinction. It's the stem cells from a cow, sheep, pig mixed with fetal blood into a petri dish, put into a steel vat, allowed to fester, grow, put into a process that looks like the pink slime from chicken McNuggets, and then printed on a 3D printer. He's also pushing fake butter, laboratory-grown butter that's not real either. Yeah. He's doing all this in the name of climate. Having said all of that, Bill Gates ran into an immovable force that he had to retreat from the climate agenda. And what was that? AI. AI power demands are demanding massive investments in fossil fuels, oil, coal, gas, and to the point he needs Bill Gates trying to get 3 Mile Island nuclear plant, an exclusive deal to power Microsoft's AI events. So you can't have a climate agenda with restrictions on energy and do that. So what Bill Gates has done is he's came out right before this conference and said it's not a doomsday. He's rethinking it. New York Times was shocked. Michael Mann, the climate scientist, immediately started attacking him. A lot of environmentalists are upset. Bill Gates is looming large over this conference, but it's not like he said, I apologize and I'm moving on. No, he's just on to the next thing, which is pushing AI, and he realizes the climate agenda is inconvenient to his interests now.
Is he at the conference? Is he going to be there? Is he going to speak?
There's no word of that. I don't know how welcome he would be. I think it would be bad optics. It's possible. He's been to many of these, as well as Jeff Bezos, as well as Richard Branson, as well as George Soros in the past. I mean, we've had a lot of these left-wing billionaires come and promote this. But of course, they're all pandering to Trump now because a lot of it is they're sucking at the federal trough of trying to get AI, Pentagon grants for AI, which the Trump administration has given out $100 million. Don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if that's such a great idea to be giving big tech money. And then, of course, utility prices are going up for people across the country. So in some odd way, the average utility payer, I know I live in Virginia, we're the number one AI data center state in terms of how many we have. Our electric bills are skyrocketing. And we are the people in the states with AI data centers. We're subsidizing Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, and Bezos' AI ambitions. There's something not right about that, Dr. Drew.
Yeah. But how do they explain that? That's interesting so far. But how do they explain how abjectly incorrect their predictions were for events that should have unfolded 20 years ago and still show no evidence of in any way showing up on the landscape? How do they talk about that? Do they talk about how they got it so wrong? Are they reconsidering their models? Shouldn't this be something of a scientific conference where they look at their errors?
No, in fact, first off, Bill Gates is admitting he got it wrong. And he's saying there's no doomsday. He's rethinking it all. And that it's not going to be that bad. We should focus on development. So he is as close as you get. But what they've typically done, and let's use King Charles as an example, when he was Prince Charles, he explicitly came up with a 100-month tipping point. And he literally counted down. There's 91 months left in which we have to act. There's 87 months. There's 65 months. When he got down to zero, without a moment of introspection, he literally erased it and then said, by 2047, we have to act or we're going to die. It's just like they run out of time. The tipping point fails to happen, whatever it is, the Arctic free ice, at some temperature goal or whatever it is with sea level. And they just ignore that they ever said it and they just make a new prediction. So when current reality fails to alarm, they make scarier and scarier predictions of the future. And you asked if they've adjusted. No, they have not adjusted the models. In fact, they tune the models. There's something called RCP 8.5, which is a modeling algorithm, which basically gets an extreme scenario. So when they do a study, and the UN loves to hype it, they'll have multiple scenarios. They'll have a low range scenario, a mid range, and a high extreme end. You can bet the UN is going to go with that extreme end. And you have the UN Secretary General just coming out with the same crap every conference about how the world must act. No one misses it because they know it's all important part of the campaign cause. This isn't about the science. The UN Climate Panel was formed in 1988. It became a self-interested lobbying organization. It was tasked to look at how CO2 influences the climate, carbon dioxide, and the UN at the same time was tasked with being able to solve the problem. So if at any point the United Nations fails to find a climate emergency, then they lose the second part of their job, which is solving the climate emergency. And so that is why it's a self-interested lobbying organization. They're never going to walk away from it, because if they fail to find, if the science, as we heard during COVID, fails to find a climate catastrophe, then the UN is no longer in charge of this. They're no longer in charge of the hundreds of billions of climate slush fund. They no longer have the ability, as they almost did just a month ago, imposing that global shipping carbon tax. They're coming after an airline global tax next. They have all of these agreements, treaties. It all goes back to 1992 with George H.W. Bush that got us into this mess. But to answer your question directly, they have no shame. They never go back. The one thing they're trying a little bit different this time, and the opening of this conference, the Associated Press is quoting these UN officials. They're basically saying, because of these UN climate summits, we've staved off the worst effects of global warming.
Oh my gosh.
We were on the path to 2.5 degrees. Now we've limited it to 1.5. Okay. So they're claiming success. Perfect. Of course, the problem with that is 80% of our energy still comes from fossil fuels 33 years after we got into this mess from 1992. And every climate summit, from Kyoto in the 90s to Copenhagen in 2010 to Paris 2015 to Egypt, has CO2 continuing to go up. No climate summit has done anything about what they say is the greatest existential threat facing our planet.
Fantastic. Well, what's fascinating to me is how these sorts of hysterias always have a religious structure to them. This is like the millennials, the millenarians waiting for the rapture. The rapture doesn't come. They go, I guess we got the date and time wrong. Oh, that's right. It's 3 years from now. Okay, we'll wait then. This is such nutty, cuckoo human behavior. And the fact that we allow our government to waste money on this is, I listen, I have no problem with, I was part of the ecology movement back in the 70s. I'm good with us being good to the climate, but the hysteria part and the amount of waste in terms of money and the human suffering that comes on the other side because the money isn't being spent on human flourishing. And like you said, they're requiring these people that live around this city in Brazil who don't have sewage, don't have plumbing, to worry about net zero. Give me a break.
Absolutely. In fact, there was a couple things on that. First off, you make a very important point. We need to distinguish the climate issue specifically from environmentalism. Now, if you go back to the first Earth Day, 1970, you had a real push from middle America, from people in the cities, from people worried about the filthy rivers, the Cuyahoga River, the New York Harbor, all the disgusting, the smog and water quality. Yep. And since 1970, we raised a consciousness. Now, a lot of people, a lot of people are ambivalent. The first Earth Day had a lot of overpopulation scares and environmental doomsday, but it had as its thrust. The reason it was successful was not because of the Paul Ehrlich's warning about a doomsday overpopulation. It was successful and endured for many decades because middle America and the average American could identify with it. They wanted a cleaner environment. So what happened was they put it on the sort of the national consciousness. And since 1970, we've had radical increases in economic growth, radical increases in population, all while radically improving our air and water quality. Now, Dr. Drew, the World Health Organization recognizes the U.S. as among the cleanest air in the world and cleanest water, number 1 and 2. There were still problems. We still have, lead. We still have toxic waste sites. But what happened was climate change hijacked that agenda. So you had absurdity like, remember East Palestine, Ohio, where the Biden administration, all they were worried about is climate change and woke and racist highways, and they were letting the people, flounder in those places. Well, one of the things when you remove the climate obsession from regulatory agencies, as the Trump administration has done, you can actually start working on the environmental problems that aren't this tenuous grip about concentrations of carbon dioxide in the environment. So my point being is, we have largely solved the air and water quality. Even like Politico reporters and mainstream reporters, environmental reporters, all admit that. And so climate change had to be its own thing to scare people, and that's where we are with it. But you mentioned, the idea of spending this money. Well, a couple things here. 80% of the local people here in the city of Belém don't have access to modern sewage. So if you walk out, this is a rental house I have, it's like $4,900 for the week here in Belém. And it's no way it's near worth that. It's just that there was no housing here. By the way, there's not enough hotels, not enough rental housing. So they brought in cruise ships for the UN delegates to stay at. They brought them in the local river here. Cruise ships have a higher carbon footprint than flying here and getting a hotel room combined. It's almost, they're clear cutting the Amazon. They're bringing in cruise ships. You had the UK Prime Minister, the royal family flying on private jets. It's just unbelievable. Meanwhile, you have a city here in dire poverty. You take a right outside of this house that I'm renting here, and it's massive building collapse and infrastructure. There's piles of trash in the streets up to my waist. There's holes and potholes. Looks like after a Beirut bombing in the Middle East. It is unbelievable that the city is just screaming. It needs some kind of development, infrastructure, economic growth. Instead, they're hosting a conference that's going to centralize and corporate government collusion, this central planning to save the planet as the overarching goal through net zero. Well, real people suffer. And that's what is so immoral about this whole conference from the beginning. It's always been like this. And the idea being, we're going to worry about a trace essential gas in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide. And their solution isn't for economic growth and wealth for Brazilians. Their solution is climate aid. The other interesting angle is historically the largest attending delegation to these UN summits are African nations. Why is that? Because the UN figured a long time ago, decades ago, that poor nations are not going to sign on to a UN agenda if it's going to harm their future development. So what they did is they promised them hundreds of billions of dollars a year in a UN climate slush fund. And now you have all these countries coming wanting handouts. It's not necessarily the countries. It's the leaders. And so this money,
Yeah.
when the UN divvies up this money, I talked to a South African development activist at a UN summit that was in South Africa a decade ago. And he explained that the UN Climate Slush Fund goes to the developing world leaders who are most likely and able to lock their citizens in poverty and limit their development. The UN will pay you because if you are a poor nation, your carbon footprint is lower, you're doing it right for the climate. So that means you're going to get money, you're going to be able to hand it out to your friends, you're going to be able to build stadiums in your name, you're going to be able to buy votes, you're going to be able to politically organize. And the UN, that's one of the things the UN is incredibly efficient at, incredibly talented at, I'll say that, is they know the inner workings of politics. They know how to grease the global political scene. And that's how you get the developing world leaders here against the interests of their own people.
When are we going to learn the dangers of these centralized, particularly globally centralized authorities? I don't get it. Hopefully, some awakening shall occur. Thank you, Mark, for the report. Where do you want people to find you? What else are you working on?
ClimateDepot.com. It's at Climate Depot. We're doing daily reports here. Check out my X feed at Climate Depot. Check out my website. And I'm fighting this battle. The biggest thing I want to leave you with is George H.W. Bush got us in this UN Sustainable Development Rio Earth Summit Treaty. The Senate ratified it. I'm calling on Donald Trump's administration to give permanence to the end of this UN relationship. We need to vacate that treaty. He needs to, Mr. President, tear up that 1992 Rio Earth Summit Treaty. That would give us permanence. It would make it harder for future President Gavin Newsom or AOC to get us back into this mess. So that's what I'm working on, and we're reaching out to the Trump administration. So thank you.
Thank you. Love an update on that. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Dr. Drew.
All right, Mark. All right, excellent. Really interesting guest today. Coming up tomorrow, I think we have 3 guests coming in. I think if you have a Fry is coming in, amongst other things. Maybe throw up our guests in here. Yes, Andrew Wilco and Ms. Pat's going to give us a report. She, of course, herself has a wild story. Thursday, great guest. Charlie Sheen coming in. Dr. Aaron Cariotti. You remember him from the COVID mess. Jiaoying Summers coming around, Elaine Kulati. We got Rob Henderson coming in with Chloe Carmichael that same day, a big psychological and anthropology day. Got a lot of guests coming up. We appreciate you being here. We are here at this TWC Summit. I want you to keep an eye out for the Wellness Company. They have some really tremendous initiatives about to be initiated to help us all with our healthcare and our healthcare expenses. Really, they're thinking way outside the box. And so far, I'm delighted with everything I'm seeing. So keep an eye out with TWC. Appreciate y'all being here. Thank you to Augusta Precious Metals, our new sponsor here. So take a look at they're very interested in educating people about their economic opportunities and how to approach uncertainty in the future. Susan, anything on your front? She's here to set this whole thing up for me today. All good?
No, you did a great job.
All right. Thank you, Caleb. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We quickly on the restream and on the rants. I was watching the restream as best I could. You guys were quite active today with really interesting comments. I'm going to pull the rug out from under the NSA by... No, come on now. Imperial authorities seem to be growing strong enough to seriously fight against active, anticipated future corruption. Imperial authority. Maybe I don't know what that is yet. Trump needs to step into it harder. Okay, meaning get out of that UN agreement. All right, everybody, thank you all for being here. We will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Again, I think it'll be this location, so look for us here, 4 o'clock Pacific time tomorrow.
Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. Emily Barsh is our content producer. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.